Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of Great Books in 10 Minutes. This is the second part from our 2-video series on Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. Before we start, if you haven't downloaded it yet, the free companion app for this channel is available on both the Apple Store and Google Play Store. With this app, you'll get access to bonus content, trivia quizzes for each episode, and a free ebook library. To download, simply scan the QR code with your phone or click the links in the description box below. On the train to Spain, Jake and Bill encountered a group of Catholic pilgrims who had booked the dining car, forcing them to make do with sandwiches and wine in their compartment. At the Bayonne station, they were reunited with Robert Cohn and took a cab to his hotel, where they would all stay. Before departing to Pamplona, Jake, Bill, and Robert Cohn explored Bayonne under the radiant sun. Upon their arrival at the Montoya Hotel in Pamplona, they indulged in a Spanish lunch, during which Cohn's nervousness about his past with Brett in San Sebastian became apparent. Witnessing Cohn's self-righteous attitude, Bill challenged him to a bet regarding Brett and Mike's arrival, with Bill confident they would come that night, while Cohn was certain they would be late as usual. Following lunch, Jake ventured to familiar spots in Pamplona, including the cathedral, where he prayed for himself, his friends, and a successful bullfighting festival. Jake then, seeing Cohn's desperate efforts to impress Brett, like getting a haircut and shaving, deliberately accompanied Cohn to the train station. He did so to both amuse himself with Cohn's annoyance because of his presence and to observe Cohn's nervousness. To their disappointment, Brett and Mike were not on the train. Cohn was so disappointed that he relinquished his bet with Bill. Later that night, Jake received a telegram from Mike, revealing their delayed arrival so Brett could recuperate. Upon hearing this, Cohn decided to stay behind and wait for Brett, promising to rejoin Jake and Bill in the mountains with Brett and Mike. Jake found Bill, who while shaving his face revealed that Cohn had confided in him about having a date with Brett in San Sebastian. Bill mocked Cohn's presence on the trip, though he admitted liking Cohn despite finding him awful. Bill then ranted about Brett's foolishness in going to San Sebastian with Cohn instead of someone like himself or Jake. He then jokingly praised his own face as trustworthy for women. Ultimately, Bill was glad Cohn wouldn't be joining them for trout fishing in the Irati River, and he and Jake eagerly anticipated getting drunk on wine before their bus trip. The bus journey was lively, with Basque passengers offering drinks and playful banter, making the trip enjoyable for Jake and Bill. Arriving in the mountains, they encountered a police officer who checked their fishing permits before they settled into an inn run by a stout woman. To combat the chill, Bill played the piano while Jake negotiated the room rate, and they warmed up with hot rum punches. In the morning, Jake woke up and dug up some worms for bait. Bill woke up and they had coffee and buttered toast. Bill teased Jake about digging worms and accused him of being an expatriate who had lost touch with his roots. Bill also mentioned that some people thought expatriates were impotent, which Jake dismissed. They joked about the Civil War being about Abraham Lincoln's love for General Grant. They then packed a lunch and wine for their fishing trip and left. Jake and Bill went fishing, with Jake catching 6 trout using worms and Bill catching 4 larger trout using a fly. They cooled the wine, ate their lunch, and drank the wine. Bill made a humorous tribute to William Jennings Bryan by reversing the order of eating the chicken and eggs. As they became drunk, Bill asked Jake if he had ever been in love with Brett, which Jake admitted but didn't want to discuss further. They took a nap and then walked back to the hotel. Jake and Bill stayed at the inn for 5 more days, swimming and playing bridge with an Englishman named Harris in the evenings. While staying at the inn, one morning, the Englishman Harris gave Jake a letter from Mike, informing him that they would reach Montoya Hotel in Pamplona on Tuesday and asking Jake how to join them. Jake decided to leave for Pamplona that afternoon to meet their friends. They also received a telegram from Cohn saying he was coming on Thursday. Jake sent a telegram back, stating they would be back that very night, so there was no need for Mike, Brett, and Cohn to travel. Jake and Bill arrived at the Montoya Hotel in Pamplona, where preparations were underway for the fiesta. Jake explained Montoya's passion for bullfighting and how he separated the aficionados from commercial bullfighters. They all watched as the bulls were released into the corrals. Mike taunted Cone, likening him to a steer following Brett wherever she went, suggesting he should know better than to linger where he's not wanted. Despite the tension, they enjoyed a pleasant supper, with Brett radiating beauty and the group fostering a lively atmosphere reminiscent of wartime dinners, where calm coexisted with chaos and danger. Jake was very drunk after dinner and stood on the balcony. He reflected on disliking Brett being with other men and the cost of friendships with women, which went beyond money. Jake wished Mike would hurt Cone, but also didn't like Mike berating him every chance he got. He called his dilemma morality and then decided that he should call it immorality rather than morality. He then mused about the English language as spoken by British people, before finally falling asleep toward daylight after more reading. The next 2 days were calm, with preparations for the fiesta continuing. Brett told Jake she would love to hear him confess, and they went to visit the local cathedral. They saw Cone outside the church, realizing he had followed them there. Jake, not wanting to embarrass Cone further, decided to not say anything. The three of them then went to a gypsy camp, where Brett had her fortune told. On July 6th, a rocket burst announced the start of the fiesta in Pamplona, with people pouring in from the countryside. Jake, Bill, Cone, Brett, and Mike watched a religious procession with effigies of giants, Moors, a king and queen, and dancers passing through the streets. At a wine shop, the group partied with festival goers, and Brett learned how to drink from a wineskin from the locals. The next day at the bullfight, Jake cautioned Brett against watching the horses after they were struck by the bulls. Afterward, he went back to the hotel to fetch his wine and was introduced to the young bullfighter Pedro Romero by the hotel owner, Montoya. Throughout the bullfight, Jake guided Brett through the nuances of the spectacle. Pedro Romero emerged as a standout talent, far surpassing the other matadors. Brett was mesmerized by Romero's mastery, his effortless control over the bulls, and his good looks. Despite the rain, the fiesta persisted the following day. Montoya sought Jake's counsel regarding the American ambassador's invitation to Pedro Romero, fearing the potential corruption of the young bullfighter. Jake advised against conveying the message, expressing concern for Romero's well-being and cautioning Montoya about an American woman, meaning Brett, who collected bullfighters. At the restaurant, they encountered Romero conversing with a bullfighting critic. Jake introduced Romero to his companions, and the young bullfighter engaged with them politely. Jake intervened when Mike, inebriated, began disparaging Cone and insinuating about Brett's interest in Romero, preventing the situation from escalating. The group then headed outside to watch fireworks, albeit disrupted by the wind. Later at a bar, Bill spotted an acquaintance named Edna. Then the two of them, accompanied by Mike, left to mess with the English patrons. Fed up with Cone following her everywhere like a hopeless romantic, Brett lashed out at him, telling him to leave her and Jake alone so they could talk. When Cone left, Brett told Jake she was in love with Pedro Romero, and that once she wanted something, she must have it. Brett asked Jake to stay on her side and help her. Jake and Brett ended up in a cafe where they encountered Pedro Romero. Romero played along with Brett's flirtations, joking about her reading his fortune and asking her to tell him he would live forever and become a millionaire. Jake left Brett and Romero alone for a while. Upon returning, Jake realized they had gone together. Jake found Bill, Mike, and Edna outside a bar where they had been thrown out by the police for bothering the patrons. Mike revealed that he was completely bankrupt. On their way to another bar, they encountered Robert Cone. Cone became aggressive when Jake wouldn't tell him where Brett had gone, and Mike drunkenly told Cone that Brett was with Pedro Romero. Enraged, Cone called Jake a pimp and knocked him down with a punch. As Jake walked back to the hotel, everything looked new and strange to him, like when he had been kicked in the head during a football game in his hometown. Bill told him to go see Robert Cone, who was in a bad state, and asked for him. Jake went to Cone's room, where Cone was lying face down on the bed, crying. Cohn apologized to Jake for his behavior, saying he couldn't stand Brett treating him like a stranger after they had lived together in San Sebastian. He asked Jake to forgive him, saying Jake was his only friend. Jake told Cohn he forgave him, and Cohn said he was leaving in the morning. Jake woke up with a headache, remembering he had promised Edna, Bill's friend, that he would take her to watch the bulls run into the ring. He witnessed the chaotic scene as the bulls charged through the crowd, goring and trampling several people, including one man who was severely injured after being tossed into the air by a bull's horn. Despite the violence, the crowd cheered as the bulls entered the ring. In a conversation with a waiter at the hotel, the waiter expressed his disdain for bullfighting, saying it was stupid to risk one's life just for fun. Jake later found out that the injured man had died. The next day, the deceased man's wife and 2 little children came to collect his body. A funeral ensued, with the coffin being transported by train back to his town, accompanied by the widow and children riding in a third-class wagon. The bull that killed the man was later killed that afternoon by Pedro Romero, who cut off its ear as a trophy and gave it to Brett. Jake returned to the hotel, went up to his room, and lay down, not feeling sleepy despite the early hour. Bill and Mike soon joined him, recounting the chaotic events of the morning's bull run, where many people were injured by the bulls. They made fun of Jake for getting punched by Cohn the previous night. Jake asked where Cohn went after hitting him. Mike revealed that Cohn had found Brett and Romero together in Romero's room and beat the young bullfighter, knocking him down repeatedly. He had then tried to take Brett with him and make an honest woman out of her. Bill and Mike mockingly continued that Brett defended Romero, and Cohn ended up crying and wanting to shake hands with Romero. The bullfighter, despite being repeatedly knocked down by Cohn, found a chance and, pretending that he wanted to shake his hand, punched him in the face. Mike found the whole situation amusing but also unpleasant. Mike then talked about Brett's unhappy marriage to her first husband, Lord Ashley, who would make her sleep on the floor and threaten to kill her with a loaded gun every night. Despite this, Mike said Brett enjoyed life. The next day and at noon, as Jake, Bill, and Mike were eating, Brett showed up, and after making sure that Cohn had left, she joined them. Mike, being drunk as always, made a few remarks about Brett being with Pedro Romero and angrily flipped over the table. Brett asked Jake to take a walk with him. After briefly mentioning that Pedro Romero had been badly injured by Cohn, Brett asked Jake to accompany him to a chapel where she could pray for the young bullfighter. At the chapel, however, she felt uneasy and they left. Later that day, the bullfight began, with 3 of the best bullfighters, Belmonte, Marcial, and Pedro Romero, taking turns facing the bulls. Belmonte, who had been a legendary bullfighter in his youth, and had retired as the undisputed champion, was booed by the crowd due to his slow moves and riskless performance. Young Pedro Romero, however, impressed everyone with his skilled and graceful bullfighting despite his injuries from the previous fight with Cohn. Romero's performance with a bull that was colorblind was particularly impressive, as he had to rely on his body movements to guide the bull's charges. Outside the bull ring, Bill asked Jake where Cohn went, and Jake reluctantly replied that he must have gone to his old girlfriend Frances. Seeing Jake's miserable state, Bill bought him a few rounds of drinks to help him feel better. At the hotel, Mike told Jake that Brett was looking for him to say goodbye and that she had already left with Pedro Romero. The fiesta in Pamplona was over, and Jake woke up the next morning to find the town empty. He met up with Bill, and they decided to get a car to Bayonne, where Bill would catch a train to Paris. They also discussed Mike's plans to go to Saint-Jean-de-Luz. Along the way, Mike opted to stay with them for a bit longer. Jake, Bill, and Mike stopped at a bar where they rolled dice for drinks. They then drove along the coastal road, passing through various villages. When it was time for Bill to catch his train, they stopped at the hotel where Mike would stay. After bidding farewell to Mike, Jake accompanied Bill to the train station, and there they said goodbye. Jake returned to Bayonne and checked into a hotel he had stayed at previously. He spent the afternoon reading newspapers and feeling strange about being back in France after the fiesta in Spain. Jake had dinner at a cafe in Bayonne, enjoying the wine and the simple pleasures of being in France. He appreciated the straightforward and transactional nature of French service, and tipped generously to make friends, knowing he might return. The next morning, Jake took a train to San Sebastian. He checked into a hotel with a balcony overlooking the town and green mountainside. After settling in, he went for a swim at the beach and observed the bicycle race passing through. Jake watched the bicycle riders at their hotel, amused by their friendship and togetherness. He spoke with a team manager who praised the sport and claimed France was becoming the most sporting country. Just as Jake was enjoying his time in San Sebastian, he received telegrams from Brett asking him to come to Madrid as she was in trouble. He booked a place on the express train for the next day. Jake arrived in Madrid and located Brett at the Hotel Montana. The proprietress was initially reluctant to allow him to see Brett, but eventually gave in. Jake reunited with Brett, who had recently parted ways with the young bullfighter. Brett revealed she had been considering marrying the young bullfighter but decided against it, as she didn't want to ruin him. She was relieved to be free of the situation, but also emotional about it. Brett expressed her intention to return to her fiancé Mike despite his flaws, stating that he was both nice and awful just like herself. Over martinis, Brett mentioned the young bullfighter's inexperience with women before her and felt good about deciding not to continue with him. At lunch, Jake and Brett discussed the nature of belief, with Brett suggesting her decision not to take advantage of young Pedro Romero was akin to having a god. Jake inquired about her plans, and they agreed to have more wine. Over more wine, Jake became intoxicated, prompting Brett to caution him against getting drunk. Despite her concerns, Jake suggested going for a ride to see Madrid. Brett lamented the good time they could have had together, and Jake acknowledged the poignancy of her sentiment. I hope you enjoyed my summary of Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. If you haven't downloaded it yet, the free companion app for this channel is available on both the Apple Store and Google Play Store. With this app, you'll get access to bonus content, trivia quizzes for each episode, and a free ebook library. To download, simply scan the QR code with your phone or click the links in the description box below. Thank you and see you in the next episode.